The pizza delivery boy's eyes went wide when the knife punched through his sternum, but he didn't scream, just made this wet gasping sound as blood bubbled up from his lungs. I held him against the doorframe until the light faded from his face, then dragged his body down to the basement. 22 years old, according to his driver's license. Austin Reeves. Probably had a girlfriend, maybe parents who were wondering why he wasn't answering his phone. I didn't give a shit. My daughter Alexis had come home from school today with her shirt torn and dried blood under her fingernails from where she'd tried to fight back. The bruises on her arms were fresh, purple finger marks where they'd grabbed her. When I'd asked what happened, she'd just shaken her head and locked herself in her room. 13 years old and already learning that the world would hurt her, while I hid inside like a broken shell of what used to be a man. 3 years ago, I would have marched into that school and torn those little bastards apart with my bare hands. 3 years ago, I was a different person, a man who could protect his family, who didn't collapse into panic attacks at the thought of stepping outside his own front door. Then came the night that destroyed everything. I'd been driving home from my construction job, Alexis and her mother Jessica in the back seat, when the drunk driver ran the red light. The impact flipped our car 3 times before it came to rest upside down in a drainage ditch. I'd been thrown clear, barely scratched, while my wife and daughter were trapped in the wreckage. Jessica died instantly, her neck snapped on the second roll. But Alexis was conscious, crying for help while gasoline leaked from the tank and sparked against hot metal. I could hear her screaming my name, begging me to get her out, while I stood frozen on the roadside like a worthless piece of shit. The fire department arrived 7 minutes later. 7 minutes of listening to my daughter's terror while I did nothing but shake and vomit and call 911 over and over like that would somehow help. They cut her out with 30 seconds to spare before the gas tank exploded. Alexis survived with minor injuries. I survived with something broken inside my skull that made the outside world feel like an ocean of chaos I couldn't navigate. Agoraphobia, the doctors called it. Panic disorder. Post-traumatic stress. Whatever label they wanted to slap on it, the result was the same. I became a prisoner in my own house, while my daughter grew up without a father who could protect her. I'd found Dad's journal 6 months after Jessica's funeral, while cleaning out the basement storage room. It had been hidden inside a locked box underneath decades of Christmas decorations, wrapped in oiled leather with a note in Dad's handwriting. For Jacob, when you can't be the man you need to be, sometimes you have to find other ways to fight. The bastard had known. Somehow he'd known I'd end up like this. Broken, useless, watching my daughter suffer while I cowered behind locked doors. The journal contained 40 years of supernatural encounters, detailed instructions for rituals that normal people would dismiss as fantasy. But I wasn't normal people anymore. I was a coward who'd failed his family when they needed him most. 10 rules. Follow them exactly. Deviate, and you become the bound. I dragged Austin's body across the basement floor, leaving a crimson smear on the concrete. The symbols I'd carved over the past week formed a perfect circle around the old drain, each mark exactly as depicted in Dad's spidery handwriting. The kid was heavier than I'd expected, but adrenaline made the work easier. Rule 1. The circle must be carved into earth that has known death. The basement floor had seemed normal until I'd started digging. 6 inches down, I'd hit bones, human bones, old and yellowed. Dad's house had been built on a forgotten cemetery, apparently. Perfect for this kind of work. Rule 2. The sacrifice must be innocent of the crimes you seek to punish. Austin Reeves had never hurt my daughter, probably never hurt anyone, based on the random acts of kindness sticker on his car bumper and the college textbooks scattered across his passenger seat. But innocence was exactly what the ritual required. Innocent blood to balance the scales against guilty souls. Rule 3. The demon's true name must be carved into the sacrifice's flesh before death. I'd done this part while Austin was still breathing, pinned under my weight on the front porch. 7 letters carved deep into his chest. Beleth, the terrible king. According to the grimoires, he commanded 85 legions and specialized in justice through violence, perfect for what those little monsters at school had coming. Rule 4. The victim must die believing they're safe. Austin had been smiling when I'd opened the door, holding a large pepperoni pizza and asking if I wanted to add breadsticks to my order. He'd thought he was just making a delivery, earning his college money one pizza at a time. The betrayal in his eyes when the knife went in had been almost as satisfying as the blood. Rule 5. The parchment must be prepared from the sacrifice's skin. I peeled the flesh from Austin's back in long strips, working carefully to avoid tears. Human skin was different from the animals I'd practiced on, softer, more pliable. It stretched like rubber as I scraped away the fat and muscle, leaving clean white sheets ready for writing. Rule 6. The contract must be written in mixed blood, sacrifice, and summoner. Austin's blood was still warm when I mixed it with my own, creating a dark red ink that seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. The contract terms were simple. Beleth would punish the 6 children who were tormenting Alexis, and in exchange, I would serve him for 1 year after the work was complete. Rule 7. The ritual must be performed during the victim's dying breath. I'd timed this perfectly. Austin was still technically alive when I began the incantation, though barely. His chest rose and fell in shallow gasps as I spoke the words Dad had written in the journal's margins, syllables that felt wrong on my tongue, like trying to speak with a mouth full of insects. Rule 8. The summoner must offer something of equal value to what they seek. 6 young lives for 1 year of my servitude. The math seemed fair, considering what they'd done to Alexis, what they were still doing, day after day, while I cowered in this house like a broken animal. Rule 9. The binding must be sealed with an act of permanent commitment. I pressed my bleeding palm against Austin's forehead, feeling his final breath escape through his parted lips. The moment our blood mixed, the basement temperature dropped 20 degrees, and the carved symbols began to glow with sickly phosphorescence. Rule 10. Once summoned, the demon cannot be dismissed until all terms are fulfilled. The air above Austin's corpse began to ripple and tear, like reality was a sheet being ripped apart by invisible hands. Something vast and terrible pushed through the opening, filling the basement with the stench of sulfur and burnt copper. Beleth materialized slowly, his form solidifying from shadow and flame. He stood 8 feet tall, with pale skin covered in ritual scars and eyes like burning coals. No horns, no wings, just a tall, gaunt man who radiated menace like heat from a furnace. "Jacob Morrison," he said, and his voice carried echoes of distant screaming. "Your father's son. You knew my father?" Richard and I had several profitable arrangements over the years. Insurance investigators who asked too many questions, business rivals who couldn't be reasoned with. Beleth examined Austin's corpse with professional interest. He was more creative with his sacrifices, though. Pizza delivery boys are rather mundane. I thought about Dad's construction business, how it had thrived despite economic downturns that killed his competitors. The mysterious accidents that had befallen anyone who challenged his contracts or questioned his methods. He never told me about any of this. Why would he? Richard hoped you'd live a normal life, free from family obligations. But agoraphobia makes normal life rather difficult, doesn't it? Beleth stepped over Austin's body, his bare feet leaving smoking prints on the concrete. 6 children have been tormenting your daughter. I know their names, their faces, their deepest fears. What will you do to them? That depends on the severity of their crimes against Alexis. Beleth's smile revealed teeth filed to sharp points. The ringleader deserves special attention naturally. The followers will receive more, proportional corrections. How do you know about Alexis's situation? Child pain calls to my kind across dimensional barriers. Your daughter's suffering has been broadcasting distress signals for weeks." Belith gestured at the air, and images began forming in the shadows. Alexis being shoved against lockers, having her lunch money stolen, being cornered in bathroom stalls while older kids took photos. My hands clenched into fists as I watched my daughter's daily torment play out in supernatural detail. She'd hidden it from me, tried to protect me from the truth because she knew I couldn't help her. But now I could. "When do we start?" "We've already begun," Belith said. "Madison Cross is currently experiencing the first phase of her education." An image formed in the air. A bedroom with pink walls and cheerleader posters. A 12-year-old girl lay sleeping in a canopy bed, her blonde hair spread across silk pillowcases. As I watched, she began to convulse violently, her body arching off the mattress as if something was trying to claw its way out of her chest. "What are you doing to her?" "Showing her what it feels like to be helpless," Belith replied. "Madison Cross has been the architect of your daughter's suffering. She organizes the attacks, recruits other children to participate, documents the humiliation for social media. A very thorough child." Madison's mouth opened in a silent scream, her eyes rolling back until only the whites showed. Dark veins began spreading across her skin like infection, pulsing with each heartbeat. "She's 12 years old." "Age is irrelevant when it comes to evil," Belith said calmly. "Madison Cross understands exactly what she's doing when she orchestrates your daughter's torment. She enjoys it, feeds on it. Children like her grow up to become the worst kind of adults." I wanted to argue, but the images of Alexis being tormented were still fresh in my mind. Madison had been in several of them, always directing the action, always making sure someone was filming. What happens to the others? Tyler Brooks, Jordan Walsh, Brittany Flores, Cody Santos, and Isabella Martinez. They'll each receive customized corrections based on their specific contributions to your daughter's suffering. Beleth's coal-black eyes reflected the basement's dim lighting. But Madison is the priority. Remove the leader, and the followers lose direction. The image of Madison shifted, showing her parents' bedroom where her father was shaking her awake. She wasn't responding, just convulsing and making choking sounds. Her mother was on the phone with 911, panic making her voice shrill. "The hospital won't be able to help her," Beleth said conversationally. "Human medicine has no tools for treating supernatural intervention. They'll run tests, find nothing wrong, and eventually diagnose it as a seizure disorder." "You're going to kill her?" "Eventually. But death is just the beginning, Jacob. Madison Cross will experience every moment of pain she's inflicted on your daughter, magnified and concentrated into pure agony. Only then will she understand the true cost of cruelty. I should have felt satisfied watching Madison suffer. This was justice, the ringleader of Alexis's tormentors finally getting what she deserved. But something about the scene unsettled me. Maybe it was how young she looked in that hospital bed, or how her parents clutched her hands and begged the doctors to help their daughter. How long will this take? 6 children, 6 weeks. 1 week per child for proper education. Belith waved his hand, and Madison's image disappeared. Your daughter's torment lasted 3 months. They're receiving mercy. And after that, what happens to me? You serve me for 1 year, as specified in the contract. Nothing too demanding. Collection work, mostly. Gathering debts from people who've made foolish bargains. Encouraging compliance from reluctant associates. Belith smiled, showing those filed teeth. Your father was quite skilled at such tasks. What kind of debts? The kind that can't be collected through legal channels. Souls, years of life, firstborn children. You'd be amazed how creative people get when they're desperate. Belith examined his fingernails, which were black and sharp as claws. Don't worry, Jacob. Most of the work can be done from your house. I understand your limitations. The agoraphobia. Even now, standing in my own basement with a demon I'd summoned myself, I could feel the familiar tightness in my chest at the thought of leaving this house. The panic attacks had been getting worse lately, triggered every time I watched Alexis leave for school knowing I couldn't follow her, couldn't protect her from the world that wanted to hurt her, just like I hadn't protected Jessica. What if I can't do the work? Then you'll learn to overcome your fears, or you'll suffer the consequences of contract violation. Beleth's expression grew cold. I'm not your therapist, Jacob. I'm your employer. Results are all that matter. A new image formed in the air. Alexis walking home from school, her backpack torn and dragging behind her. Her lip was split, and there were tears on her cheeks that she kept wiping away with her sleeve. 3 older kids followed about 20 feet behind, laughing and throwing things at her. The sight hit me like a physical blow. There was my daughter, hurt and alone, while I stood trapped in this basement with a creature from hell because I was too broken to walk outside and help her myself. This happened today, Beleth said, after you summoned me. The children don't know yet that their leader is in the hospital, so they're continuing their campaign without her. Rage flared in my chest as I watched my daughter endure more abuse. The same helpless fury I'd felt watching Jessica die, watching Alexis trapped in that burning car, while I stood frozen like a useless statue. These monsters had hurt her again, even after I'd made my deal with hell itself, and I still couldn't do anything to help her directly. Make it stop, I growled. Patience. Madison's hospitalization will create confusion and fear among her followers. They'll wonder if they're next, if whatever happened to her might happen to them. Fear makes children more receptive to correction. I want them to suffer, all of them. The words came out with more venom than I'd intended, but I didn't care. These kids had no idea what real suffering was, not like watching your wife die while you stood there like a coward, not like being trapped in your own house while your daughter faced the world alone. And they will, Beleth promised. But suffering is an art form, Jacob. It requires proper pacing, careful escalation, creative implementation. Your father understood this. He never rushed the process. Tell me about my father's deals. Beleth's expression grew nostalgic. Richard summoned me 12 times over 30 years. Usually to eliminate business competition or silence inconvenient investigators. He was methodical, patient, willing to pay the full price for quality work. What was the price? Years of service, mostly? A month here, 6 months there. By the end, Richard had given me nearly 4 years of his life. Beleth gestured around the basement. This house was built with materials I acquired through unconventional means. The foundation stones came from a demolished church, the wooden beams from a burned orphanage, sacred and profane wood, blessed and cursed stone, the perfect environment for supernatural work. I thought about growing up in this house, the way shadows always seemed darker here, how electronics never worked properly, why my mother had insisted on wearing crucifixes in every room. Dad had been hiding this supernatural life from all of us, making deals with demons while we lived obliviously above the basement where he'd carved binding circles into blood-soaked earth. Did Mom know? Catherine suspected, but Richard never told her the truth. She died believing her husband was simply a successful businessman with excellent intuition about market trends. Beleth's smile turned cruel. The cancer that killed her was entirely natural, by the way. I don't work for free. The casual revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. You could have saved her. For a price, yes, but Richard never asked, and I never offered. Our business relationship was strictly professional. I wanted to hate him for letting my mother die, but the emotion felt hollow. She'd been gone for 8 years now, and besides, I was making the same kind of bargain she'd unknowingly lived with. At least Dad had been able to leave the house, had been a real man who could protect his family when it mattered. I was just a broken coward using supernatural forces because I was too pathetic to handle my own problems. The children, I said. I want to see what happens to them. Of course you do. Belith gestured, and new images began forming around us. Tyler Brooks is next. He specializes in digital harassment, creating fake social media accounts to spread rumors about your daughter, photoshopping her face onto inappropriate images, doxing her personal information. Tyler appeared in the air above us, a skinny 13-year-old with acne and thick glasses. He was sitting at his computer, typing furiously on some forum dedicated to humiliating his classmates. What will you do to him? Turn his own tools against him. Every device Tyler touches will begin broadcasting his private information, browser history, personal photos, embarrassing messages to girls who've rejected him. The internet will become his enemy instead of his weapon. And then we escalate. Digital humiliation becomes physical manifestation. Tyler will find himself compulsively confessing his crimes in public, unable to control his own voice or actions. Very educational. You're going to make him kill himself, like Madison. That's up to Tyler. Some children break under pressure, others adapt and learn. I provide the education. Their response is their choice. Belith dismissed Tyler's image with a gesture. Would you prefer I simply executed them cleanly? No suffering, no lessons learned. No, I said quickly. I want them to understand what they did to Alexis. Then trust the process, Jacob. Revenge is most satisfying when it's thoroughly deserved. Over the next 3 days, I watched Madison Cross deteriorate in her hospital bed. The doctors had stabilized her seizures, but couldn't explain the progressive organ failure that was slowly killing her. Her kidneys shut down first, then her liver began failing. Each system failed in the exact order that psychological trauma typically destroyed people, slowly, inexorably, from the inside out. Her parents never left her side, holding her hands and reading her favorite books while machines kept her alive. They'd brought in specialists from 3 different states, spent their savings on experimental treatments, even consulted faith healers and alternative medicine practitioners. Nothing helped. On the 4th day, Madison's heart stopped beating for 6 minutes before the crash team managed to restart it. When she regained consciousness, she could only speak one word. Sorry. She repeated it constantly, like a broken record. Sorry, 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 sorry. The doctor said it was neurological damage from oxygen deprivation, but I knew better. Madison Cross was finally understanding the weight of what she'd done to my daughter. Phase 1 is complete, Belith announced during his evening visit. Madison now comprehends the pain she's inflicted. Are you ready for Phase 2? What's Phase 2? Direct confrontation. Madison will see your daughter's face every time she closes her eyes, hear her voice asking why she was so cruel. The guilt will consume her from within. And Tyler? Tyler Brooks's education begins tonight. I've already begun corrupting his digital footprint. I pulled up Tyler's social media profiles on my computer and watched in fascination as they transformed before my eyes. His carefully curated image of teenage coolness dissolved into humiliating honesty. Posts appeared describing his bedwetting problem, his fear of girls, his collection of anime body pillows. Photos uploaded themselves. Tyler crying during scary movies, Tyler getting beat up by younger kids, Tyler masturbating to cartoon characters. Within hours, Tyler's online reputation was completely destroyed. The same forums where he'd posted cruel content about Alexis were now filled with mocking comments about his own failures and perversions. Beautiful work, I murmured. This is merely the setup, Belith replied. Tomorrow, Tyler's compulsions begin. He'll find himself unable to resist confessing his crimes against your daughter in increasingly public venues. The next day, Tyler Brooks stood up in the middle of math class and began describing in graphic detail how he'd created fake nude photos of Alexis and distributed them to half the school. He couldn't stop talking, even when the teacher ordered him to sit down. The words poured out of him like vomit, each confession more damning than the last. By lunch, Tyler was in the principal's office confessing to cyberbullying, harassment, and creating child pornography. The police were called, charges were filed, and Tyler's parents were informed that their son faced potential jail time as a juvenile offender. But the confessions didn't stop there. Tyler began calling Alexis directly, leaving voicemails where he described exactly what he'd done and how much he'd enjoyed hurting her. The calls came every hour, day and night, Tyler's voice growing more hysterical with each message. "I can't stop," he sobbed into her voicemail at 3 a.m. "I want to stop, but the words keep coming out. I'm so sorry, Alexis. I'm so fucking sorry. I don't know why I did those things to you." Alexis played the messages for me with a mixture of confusion and terror. "Dad, what's happening to them? First Madison gets sick, now Tyler's having some kind of breakdown. It's like they're all going crazy." "Maybe they're finally realizing how much they hurt you," I said carefully. "But this isn't normal. People don't just break like this." Alexis studied my face with intelligent eyes that reminded me painfully of her mother. "Dad, did you do something?" "What could I do? I can't even leave the house." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "I just want it to stop, Dad. I want them to leave me alone." "They will," I promised. "Very soon." That night, Tyler Brooks was found in his bedroom, having carved the word sorry into his arms 47 times with a kitchen knife. He'd lost so much blood that he barely survived the ambulance ride to the hospital. 2 down, Belith reported. 4 to go. But I was starting to realize that revenge wasn't as satisfying as I'd expected. Madison and Tyler were broken, possibly permanently, and while they deserved punishment for what they'd done to Alexis, watching them suffer felt empty. "Are you having second thoughts?" Belith asked, reading my expression. "Number. They brought this on themselves. Indeed they did. But perhaps you're wondering if you deserve to watch children destroy themselves for your daughter's sake." The question cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I'd summoned a demon to torment kids, not to protect Alexis. That would have required me to actually leave the house and confront the bullies myself. Instead, I'd chosen the coward's path, supernatural revenge that let me stay hidden while others did the dirty work. "The beauty of binding contracts," Belith continued, "is that they remove the burden of choice. You've already committed to this course of action. Now you simply have to see it through." He was right. The ritual was complete. The deal was struck. Even if I wanted to stop this, and I wasn't sure I did, it was too late. The remaining 4 children fell apart over the next 2 weeks. Jordan Walsh began seeing things that weren't there, shadowy figures that followed him everywhere, whispering cruel comments in Alexis's voice. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating, started talking to empty air. His parents had him committed to a psychiatric facility after he tried to claw his own eyes out to stop the visions. Brittany Flores developed stigmata, bleeding wounds that appeared on her hands and feet every morning, spelling out different words each day: cruel, bully, monster. The wounds healed by evening, only to reappear the next dawn with new accusations. Cody Santos lost the ability to speak, except when apologizing to Alexis. Every other word became impossible to pronounce, leaving him capable only of expressing remorse for his participation in her torment. Isabella Martinez simply stopped. She would stand motionless for hours, staring at nothing, unresponsive to any external stimulus. The doctors called it catatonic depression, but I knew better. Isabella was experiencing every moment of pain she'd inflicted on my daughter, simultaneously and continuously. By the end of the month, all 6 children were either hospitalized, institutionalized, or dead. The bullying campaign against Alexis had completely collapsed, leaving her free to attend school without fear. "Contract fulfilled," Beleth announced on a Tuesday evening, materializing in my kitchen while I was making dinner. "Your daughter's tormentors have been educated. Now we begin phase 2 of our arrangement." What's Phase 2? Your year of service begins immediately. I have several collection jobs that require attention. Belith handed me a manila folder filled with photographs and documents. These people have defaulted on their obligations to various supernatural entities. You'll be encouraging them to honor their debts. I flipped through the files, my stomach sinking as I read the details. A woman in Portland who'd promised her firstborn child to a witch in exchange for her husband's recovery from cancer. A man in Seattle who'd sold his soul for lottery winnings and was now trying to renege on the deal. A couple in Spokane who'd bargained away 10 years of their lives for fertility treatments and were attempting to break their contract. How am I supposed to collect from these people? I can't leave my house. You'll find a way, Belith said simply, or you'll suffer the consequences of contract violation. The choice is yours, Jacob. What consequences? Belith's smile was pure malice. Alexis returns to school tomorrow. Without my protection, she'll be vulnerable to new tormentors. And there are always new tormentors. Children can sense weakness, fear, isolation. They'll swarm her like sharks smelling blood in the water. You said the bullying was over. Madison Cross's campaign is over, but nature abhors a vacuum, and school hierarchies require victims. Your daughter's newfound peace is entirely dependent on my continued intervention. The threat was clear. If I failed to honor the contract, Alexis would become a target again. Worse, since Belith's supernatural protection would be withdrawn, she'd be defenseless against whatever new cruelties awaited her. The Portland job first, I said, accepting the folder. When do I start? Tonight. Sarah Hendricks lives alone with her 6-month-old daughter. She's already 3 months overdue on her payment to Madame Zelda. Time to collect. I stared at the photograph of a young woman holding a baby, feeling sick to my stomach. You want me to take her child. I want you to collect what's owed. How you accomplish that is up to you. Belith moved toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Jacob? You have 48 hours. After that, Alexis's protection expires permanently. He vanished, leaving me alone with the files and the crushing realization that my daughter's safety depended on my willingness to destroy other families. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how I could possibly travel to Portland when I couldn't even walk to my own mailbox without having a panic attack. The agoraphobia had gotten worse over the past month, intensified by the stress of the demon summoning and the guilt over Austin's murder. But Alexis needed me to succeed. For the first time in 3 years, she'd come home from school smiling, talking about friends she'd made and classes she enjoyed. The constant fear was gone from her eyes, replaced by the natural confidence of a 13-year-old girl who felt safe in her own skin. I couldn't let that be taken away from her. The next morning, I called a taxi company and asked about rates for a trip to Portland, $300 each way, plus waiting time if I needed the driver to stay. I had enough savings to cover it barely. What time do you need pickup? The dispatcher asked. I looked out my front window at the bright sunshine and busy street, feeling my chest tighten with familiar panic. Just the thought of stepping outside made my heart race and my palms sweat. I'll call you back, I said, hanging up the phone. Maybe there was another way. Sarah Hendricks had a phone number listed in her file. I could call her, explain the situation, try to convince her to honor her agreement without actually confronting her in person. I dialed the number and waited through 4 rings before a tired voice answered. Hello? Is this Sarah Hendricks? Who's asking? My name is Jacob Morrison. I'm calling about your arrangement with Madame Zelda. Silence on the other end, then. I don't know what you're talking about. You promised your firstborn child in exchange for your husband's recovery from cancer. The cancer is gone, but you haven't honored your end of the bargain. That's impossible. David never had cancer. He's perfectly healthy. I checked the file again. According to Belith's notes, David Hendricks had been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 18 months ago. The prognosis had been terminal, 6 months to live at most. But after Sarah's deal with Madame Zelda, the cancer had simply vanished, leaving doctors baffled and David perfectly healthy. "Sarah, I know this is difficult to accept, but your husband was dying. Madame Zelda saved his life. Now she wants what you promised her." "You're insane. I'm hanging up." "Wait." The line went dead. I tried calling back 3 times, but Sarah had either turned off her phone or blocked my number. The direct approach wasn't going to work. I needed to go to Portland and confront her face to face. The panic attack hit me the moment I stepped onto my front porch. My vision tunneled, my chest felt like it was being crushed by an invisible weight, and my legs turned to jelly. I collapsed against the doorframe, gasping for air and fighting the overwhelming urge to run back inside where I was safe. But Alexis was counting on me. I forced myself to walk to the sidewalk, then to the corner where I'd arranged to meet the taxi. Each step felt like walking through quicksand, and by the time the cab arrived, I was drenched in sweat and shaking uncontrollably. "You okay, buddy?" the driver asked as I climbed into the back seat. "Just drive," I managed. "Portland, please." The 3-hour trip was pure hell. Every mile took me further from the safety of my house, deeper into hostile territory where anything could happen. I spent the drive with my eyes closed, practicing breathing exercises and trying to ignore the crushing weight of open sky pressing down on the car. We reached Portland just after noon. Sarah Hendricks lived in a modest duplex in a residential neighborhood, the kind of place where young families started their lives together. I paid the driver to wait and walked up to the front door on unsteady legs. Sarah answered on the second knock, holding her baby daughter against her shoulder. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 25, with tired eyes and the overwhelmed look of a new mother. "Are you Jacob Morrison?" she asked. "Yes." "I figured you'd show up eventually. Come in." The living room was cluttered with baby toys and medical equipment, oxygen tanks, IV stands, pill organizers, evidence of David's battle with cancer, even though Sarah claimed it had never happened. "Nice try with the phone call," Sarah said, settling into a rocking chair with the baby. "But I'm not giving up my daughter to some psycho who thinks my husband had cancer." "Where is David now?" "At work. He's a project manager for Nike. Been healthy his whole life, never even had the flu." Sarah's voice was steady, but I could see fear in her eyes. "I don't know what kind of scam you're running, but show me his medical records." "What?" "David's medical records from 18 months ago. If he never had cancer, there should be evidence of that. Doctor visits, blood tests, whatever." Sarah's confident expression wavered. "I don't have to prove anything to you." "But you can't, can you? Because deep down, you remember. You remember the diagnosis, the chemotherapy, watching him waste away while the doctors told you to prepare for the worst." I leaned forward, watching her face carefully. "You remember making a deal with Madame Zelda because you were desperate to save the man you loved." Tears began forming in Sarah's eyes. "That's not. It wasn't. It was real, Sarah. The cancer was real, the deal was real, and now the debt is real. Madame Zelda wants what you promised her." "I can't give up my baby," Sarah whispered. "She's all I have." "You have David. Healthy, cancer-free David, who should have been dead a year ago." Sarah clutched her daughter tighter and the baby began to cry. "There has to be another way. Some other payment Madame Zelda would accept." I pulled out my phone and called the number Belith had given me for Madame Zelda. It rang twice before an ancient voice answered, speaking in heavily accented English. "Yes? This is Jacob Morrison. I'm here about the Hendricks collection." "Ah, yes. The woman who thinks she can keep both her husband and her child. How delightfully naive. She wants to negotiate alternative payment terms." Madame Zelda laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "There are no alternative terms, Mr. Morrison. A deal is a deal. The child was promised. The child will be delivered. What if she can't pay? Then her husband's cancer returns with twice the virulence, and she loses them both. Simple mathematics. I hung up and turned back to Sarah, who was watching me with growing terror. What did she say? Give up the baby, or David dies anyway and you lose everything. Sarah's face crumpled. She looked down at her daughter, a beautiful baby with David's dark hair and Sarah's green eyes, and began sobbing uncontrollably. I can't do it, she whispered. I can't give her up. She's innocent. She doesn't deserve this. Neither did my daughter, I said quietly. But sometimes innocent people suffer because of choices other people make. I thought about Alexis, safe at school for the first time in months, because I'd made my own deal with a demon. How many more children would suffer to keep her protected? How many families would I destroy to preserve my daughter's peace? Please, Sarah begged. There has to be another way. I stared at this young mother clutching her baby, seeing myself 3 years ago holding Alexis in the hospital while Jessica lay dead in the morgue. The desperation in Sarah's eyes was the same desperation that had driven me to summon Belith, the same helpless fury that had made me murder an innocent pizza delivery boy. There is another way, I said slowly. What? I pulled out the contract paperwork from Sarah's file and studied the fine print. The agreement specifies your firstborn child, but it doesn't specify when delivery has to occur. I don't understand. Madame Zelda can wait. The contract doesn't expire. It just accumulates interest. You can keep your daughter for now, but eventually the debt will come due. Sarah's eyes lit up with hope. How much time? That depends on how much you're willing to pay in interest. Every year you delay costs an additional year of your husband's life expectancy. David could live to 90 if you pay now, or he could die at 50 if you wait 20 years. It was a cruel bargain, but it gave Sarah a choice. Sacrifice her daughter now, or sacrifice her husband's golden years later. Either way, Madame Zelda would collect what she was owed. I need time to think, Sarah said. You have 24 hours. After that, the original terms apply and David's cancer returns. I left my contact information and walked back to the waiting taxi, feeling sick about what I'd just done. I'd given Sarah false hope, made her believe she had options when the truth was that supernatural debts always came due eventually. But I'd bought her time, and sometimes time was all you could give someone. The drive back to my house was easier than the trip to Portland, but only because I was heading toward safety instead of away from it. By the time we reached my neighborhood, the familiar streets and houses looked like paradise compared to the hostile territory I'd just left. I paid the driver and stumbled into my house, exhausted and nauseated from the day's work. But Alexis was there to greet me, smiling and excited about her day at school. Dad, you'll never guess what happened. Katie Walsh invited me to her birthday party this weekend. Can I go? Please? Katie Walsh, Jordan Walsh's younger sister. The irony was bitter, but I managed to smile and nod. Of course you can go, sweetheart. I'm proud of you. That night, Belith appeared in my bedroom while I was trying to sleep. Excellent work in Portland, he said approvingly. Sarah Hendricks has agreed to the extended payment plan. Madame Zelda is quite pleased. When will the cancer come back? That depends on Sarah's choices over the next few years, but it will come back, Jacob. Supernatural debts always compound. What's the next job? Belith handed me another file. Seattle. A man named Robert Patterson sold his soul for lottery winnings and is now claiming the contract was fraudulent. He's hired lawyers, filed appeals, even contacted the media about supernatural fraud. Very tedious. I opened the file and studied Patterson's photograph. A middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. According to the paperwork, he'd won $47 million in the state lottery after making his deal with an entity called the Duchess of Greed. What happened to change his mind? His daughter was diagnosed with leukemia 6 months after he won the lottery. Patterson realized that money couldn't solve the problems that really mattered. And now he wants his soul back so he can make a different bargain. His soul for his daughter's health. Can he do that? Absolutely not. The Duchess owns his soul fair and square. But Patterson is a persistent man with expensive lawyers. He needs to be reminded that some contracts cannot be broken. I closed the file, feeling the weight of what I was becoming. A month ago, I'd been a broken man hiding in his house while his daughter suffered. Now I was a supernatural debt collector, traveling hundreds of miles to threaten desperate parents. But Alexis was safe. That's what mattered. "I'll leave for Seattle tomorrow," I said. "Excellent. And Jacob? This one might require more direct persuasion than the Portland job. Patterson won't be swayed by legal technicalities." After Belith left, I lay awake thinking about the choices that had brought me to this point. Every decision had seemed reasonable at the time. Summoning the demon to protect Alexis, agreeing to the collection work to maintain her safety, threatening other parents to preserve my daughter's peace. But when did protecting your child become destroying other people's children? When did love become monstrosity? I didn't have answers to those questions. All I knew was that Alexis was sleeping peacefully down the hall, free from the nightmares that had plagued her for months. Whatever I'd become, whatever I'd done, at least my daughter was safe. For now, that would have to be enough. Would have to be.